Okay, cool. I was going to say, this is like my first time doing anything kind of like this where it's going to be put out. So it's my first day, Drake.
Yay! Awesome. Well, don't worry. This is my first time too. I'm kidding. Obviously. Um, let's kind of just dive right into it, I guess. Tell us a little bit about your family structure, how many kids you have, just give us an overview of what your family looks like.
Yes. Okay. So I am a single mom and I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. Their dad is involved. He actually lives walking distance away. So he's involved in their life, but we are not together. We haven't been together in a long time. So I have been responsible for everything as far as like bringing in the money, taking care of the household stuff. Everything is on me. So it's a lot.
Okay.
And so I kind of wanted to go, I kind of was thinking about this interview for the past couple of days. So there were definitely some things I wanted to like go into within that, to perhaps support and assist people who haven't had kids yet, but also kind of tell my story so that wherever people's starting point is, if they do already have kids, smaller steps to take to get towards goals.
Fuck yeah. All right, let's just jump right into that. Like what were some of the things that you wanted to share?
So first off, since this is supposed to be, we're kind of doing this interview to talk about how to raise stable kids. I've not been the beacon of light of that by any means, but I am seeing, realizing, and understanding a lot of my mistakes. And so with that, hopefully me sharing can help others either not make those mistakes, or if they have made those mistakes, perhaps, pull themselves out of that. So anyway, so being a single mom is really tough. Because that puts all the responsibility on me. So within raising stable kids, I have been in a state of survival mode basically the entire time. So with that, then, stability starts with self. Like your kids are going to be more stable if you yourself are more stable.
Yes.
So that's the base right there, right? That's like foundation.
Yeah.
Anytime I haven't been stable with my kids, like I, have been overwhelmed and I, have, like lashed out at them. And by lash out, I mean like yelled at them or been like frustrated and like been short fused with them. It never is beneficial for anybody. They typically react harder. I typically then react within myself either harder or go into guilt. And it's like this whole cycle that just keeps going. So with being a single mom, and taking on all that responsibility and being in survival mode, it's like I haven't been able to, I haven't in small moments, but it's hard to give myself the space and grace to not to direct instead of control.
Yeah.
I kind of, it sucks sometimes because it's like with taking that all on. And I've used this analogy before, but I think it's such a good one. It's like, because I didn't set myself up in the beginning with like a stable relationship and a stable foundation within having kids. It's like trying to fix an airplane while it's in the air, right? It's like, it just doesn't, it's so like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Man.
And so I feel like that a lot of the times, and it's tough. So yeah,
a lot of what you shared kind of reminds me of like my growing up, because I grew up with a single mom as well. And it was really tough. And, we didn't have kind of the community that we're a part of, you and I are part of right now, with the tools that we have. We didn't have that available to us. And so, or at least we didn't know about it, and it was really, really tough because it was just kind of like, you are where you are, and that's what you have to deal with. And there wasn't much support for us. I was just talking with a mom yesterday, who she was saying, the culture here in the States is very much like, you might have friends around the same age as you, with the same, with kids around the same age even, but people are so busy with their own lives. They don't have really the time to support each other. They don't really, actually hang out, or even, and so they don't get to really know each other. And so what ends up happening is you kind of feel like you're doing it on your own. Right. And so, a lot of what you just said really hit home with me, because I can remember there were so many frustrating moments. And I know my mom was doing her best. I gotta say, I know she was doing her best, but the circumstances were, like you said, she hadn't really prepared for everything that was to come. And so it was just like, a lot of it was like, obviously relationship wise, but also financial wise as well, because, it was just her. So she had to work and then also come home and raise me. And it just created a situation that was less than ideal, and, from your perspective, because I talk to a lot of parents, and oftentimes they are aware that, they're doing their best, but they don't know what could be different. From your perspective, what do you see is different, I guess, having joined this community and the tools that we share and everything? I guess give us like kind of before and then after, or during now, like what's different. Yeah.
Right. So within the communities that we're a part of,
and specifically those communities, I'm not trying to hide it. Those communities are Self-Perfected, Techno Tutor, the parenting group that we have, Destiny, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
So I actually got introduced to these groups first through Destiny. So that is kind of where my starting point with this is, nice. with like the array of things that followed. So with
how long ago was that?
Okay, that was right after I had Natalie, so 10 years ago.
Okay, all right, cool.
So I had Natalie, and her dad left. And anytime I speak of him, it's not in a blaming or a like type of like that. It's like that was just what happened.
This is just the situation. Like, exactly.
Yeah, him and I are on good terms right now, and he's doing his best from his point in existence right now. He's doing the best that he can. I mean, within where he is. So this is never like a blaming thing. I have walked through a lot of that within my writing and self-forgiveness writing that I do within Destiny. And so that's not what this means when I talk about these stories. I just wanted to make that clear. Yeah, I'm not talking about him or blaming him.
That's really cool.
So another point with stability is like with kids is, even if you're not with their parent, hopefully you are, but if you're not, like trying to create a good relationship with the other person is very so with that, he left, and I had a new baby, and I was a mess and a total mess. And his sister actually lived with me at the time, and she was already part of Destiny and was exploring all of that. And so she introduced me to self-forgiveness writing. So I did that for years before I even discovered like, Techno Tutor or anything like that. So that really walked myself out of so much with just writing self-forgiveness, that alone. But so kind of like the before and after. So it's been a process. Like in the beginning, it was really messy, and it's still messy a lot of the times. But I think that the biggest thing was like giving myself grace, and my children grace, which I am really just learning after 10 years. And so with that then is like really giving myself the space to be patient with them. I see so many parents out here, even ones that are still in relationships and wherever that relationship is, but where they're like fighting with their kids to go to school, and they're like, you have to get ready and we have to be there in time, and then all these after school activities, and they're like, we have to go, we have to,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like constantly like, or they're like, you have to do this because I have to go to work, so oh my gosh, you're throwing another tantrum, and it's like constant stress, constantly having to be somewhere, constant like, and I see that so often, and I think that when we can like step back and give ourselves the space, it really, and take away a lot of that stress. That's why having a partner that is working together, like where one can take on this so that the other, typically the mom, can have that patience, have that space of grace to be there with the child. I have a good example of this where there is one point where my kids do go to school, though the groups we're part of, we typically are like, okay, techno tutor and your family are really what you need. But I personally am in a space where I'm a single mom, so I do send my kids to school, but it's like a partial homeschool. So the space where I'm at and the point that I am at within my place here, I do send them to school, but it's a dual homeschool. So with that, they only go 2 days a week, and they pick the classes, like I choose the classes. So it's almost like college where you're like, I want them to take this, this, and this,
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's like, it's kind of like, and you can create your own schedule. You can take them 1 day a week, you can take them 5 days a week.
Cool.
Yeah. So for me, like I needed that within transitioning, again, the smaller steps. Like I could be like, yeah, I want to be a homeschool mom immediately. And it's like, well, I'm still in school myself. I'm still trying to support my household. So it's like, for me to jump right into that would be not practical.
Right. Yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. It has to come in like steps, like, okay, well, I'm going to do this now. Well, this is how I'm going to move myself. So they do go to school 2 days a week, but, anyway, getting back to the point, there was one time where I was taking Christopher to school specifically because Natalie was off or something, and he really didn't want to go. And I was walking him into the school, and he literally just like stopped and didn't want to move anymore. He like refused to move. And I didn't get mad or upset. I literally just stood there with him, and I'm like, well, we need to do this today, And I explained it to him, and he just didn't want to go. He just stood there. And I literally stood there in the parking lot, and it was raining in the parking lot, and it was raining, and got rained on for an hour. We stood there for a full hour, but wow. I had the space and time. I didn't have to be at work. I mean, I had chores to do at home, but I had to kind of let those go and be like, well, this is where we are. And I literally stood there for an hour with him. And eventually he did like take a breath and go in, but it's like so many of the parents kept walking by, even had other that were just like, oh my God, I would have like lost my shit by then. I can't believe it. But it's like with the tools between, diffusing a lot of stuff with techno tutor, putting words, the words in there to diffuse within myself, writing about so much stuff, becoming self-aware and realizing that I need to give myself and them this patience changes everything. So instead of, which I have done in the past, been like, you need to go in, I have things to do, get in there, and being so upset and mad, and then the kids walking in all mad, and then I'm walking out all mad, and then I'm like all guilty and upset, and I can't even focus on what I need to do because I'm like overwhelmed, and they're probably overwhelmed, and instead of creating all that discord, it was like, it wasn't any of that. I gave the space of grace to create that for them. And when you're in a partnership where one person can provide what needs to be provided, and then that gives the space of grace, like that's like, I think one of the biggest things is if you can take away the stuff that gives stress, and that, like, I mean, of course we're going to have stresses in our lives, but like if you can remove so much of that, like expectation and so many of the things you think you need to do, like it really helps out a lot.
That's a really great point. That's like, I remember a lot of the stressors in my childhood were about school. And I didn't realize at the time just how much pressure my mom was under as far as like going to work and all of this stuff, and making sure that I was going to school and doing well at school, or not flunking out at least,
Right.
And so it's interesting because a lot of I would say the challenges within our relationship came from school, And then now as an adult, it's like none of that really mattered, like at all. Like
Right.
it was really irrelevant. And so it was just this point of contention between us for no reason, essentially. Right.
Yeah.
And so like what you're saying, like it makes total sense of, yeah, a lot of parents yell at their kids to go to this place that really at the end of the day is irrelevant, but they have to do it because they're just kind of in this routine. They're like, oh, I've got to go to work. That means you've got to go to school. And what you're saying is, as far as like the partnership, if you have a partnership where you're both in agreement, you know what your principles are, and one person is taking care of the finances, that allows for, and generally speaking, that's the guy, right? Not because he's better at it, but because the woman's better suited for taking care of the children, right? And so when one person's able to go and bring in the finances, and the other person is able to be there with the children, that does allow for so much, so much of that bullshit just kind of fades away, right? Because then it's like, oh, well, we don't actually have to go to school because now I have the time to be here with you. And then, with the tools that we have, we know that, oh, like learning is actually not that hard, Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off there. It was just like,
No, you're fine.
It was really clear what you were saying. And I was like, man, that I remember that stuff. It's fun actually talking to you because it's bringing up a lot of these memories.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's that space of grace. I mean, it really is. And if you can create that for yourself before you have kids, where you're giving yourself that time. I mean, and that, as women, and I know Katie and I have talked about this too, actually, in our last parenting meeting. As women, we typically, we have a lot going on, even if we are stay-at-home moms and stuff. It's like we have, we're, in charge of the food and the kids, and we kind of have to like direct a lot. And often if we have too much, if we're overwhelmed, which I have to say that I feel overwhelmed most of the time. And when we are in that state of overwhelmed, our directness or our direction, where we have to direct things, becomes control. And then with control comes resistance. And then with resistance, you start building in all of these other patterns that you're just like, ah, God, what have I done? And I did that, with Natalie back in the day, like before I kind of was really starting to utilize a lot of these tools. And before I had techno tutor, it was when I just had like kind of dove into Destiny, and I hadn't even started listening to like EPOF and all of that yet. So it was just kind of like very like surface, superficial stages.
Yeah.
But it's like with Natalie, I fought her so hard. Oh my God, I fought that girl so hard. And man, do I deal with those consequences still today? It's like she fights me on everything, even if it's something she wants to do. And, it's just like people are like, well, that's her personality. I'm like, well, it kind of is. But at the same time, like, I know, like, people are always like, you're so hard on yourself, Camille. And I'm like, which I am too. But I also know inside, like, I remember times with her where I just unnecessarily fought her, and then it's like, so that created that discord, and now she unnecessarily fights me, and it's like that complete reflection. I mean, God, she's such a good reflection for me on a lot of that stuff, which sucks, but it was like, it's like
yeah, okay, so let's talk about that, like, because you created a consequence. A lot of times I see in a bunch of like parenting groups, parents are like, oh, my kids aren't listening to me. What do I do? And they're looking for like some kind of quick fix. They're looking for like, what's the tip? What do I tell them? Like, a lot of times they'll say, I don't want to resort to hitting them, but if that's what I have to do to get them to listen, I'm like, whoa.
no.
Like, talk about, I guess, when you've created a consequence, what do you have to do to correct it? Because it's not usually a quick fix,
It's not a quick fix. It's kind of like taking a slingshot and like shooting the rock. And then once it's in the air, you're like, how do I fix this? How do I stop it from moving? It's like, you can't really.
Yeah.
I mean, so what I would say is kind of bringing it back to that stability within self. With Natalie, a lot of the consequences I've created with her, they're already playing out. I can't stop them. They're here, you know? And so it's like, then I have to stabilize myself within whatever that consequence is, whatever fire that has been created already. I have, that's kind of a bad way to put it, but like, I have to just walk through that consequence with her now, right? So
Yeah.
kind of like now when she does like throws a tantrum or is like has such an attitude towards things, and you know, it's like staying stable within myself and not allowing myself to take things personal. First off, like that was a big thing, is like oftentimes like I knew that I created it, and so I'm only now walking myself out of the guilt. So oftentimes what would happen before was like she would go into a tantrum and I'd be like, God, this is like my fault, like I know I created this, you know. And so then I would go into guilt, which is just another emotion. And so then it would only like build up, because then I'd feel emotional about that. And then I'd want to stop her from doing what she was doing. I was like trying to catch that rock that was already flying like way high in the air. It doesn't work. So I had to really I had to let go of a lot of that guilt, which I'm still doing, but like I'm much farther today than I was a week ago or 2 weeks ago or a couple months ago or a year ago.
Yeah.
And so it's like you kind of have to diffuse all of those. Like I put, you know, guilt and all the words surrounding it in my techno tutor, done those words so many times, you know, written about it so much. And then also actually in real life had to let it go in the moment. Like, and like, yeah, okay, she's throwing this tantrum now. Yeah, I probably created this. Okay, I'm going to take responsibility for it and stay stable within this moment, though. Like, how can I help her here? She might have to throw this tantrum, and I might just have to be like, okay, I'm here though, and we'll pick up the pieces when you've completed, you know, when you've walked through this. Like, but I'm here, stable for when that happens, you know.
Yeah,
and so not taking it personally and really having to let go.
Yeah, and then something Cameron said on the recent podcast, he said, you know, this is also now a consequence that your kids have to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you've created the consequence, now they have to also walk it. They're going to have to deal with it later.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that from that slingshot, that rock's already in the air. It's already done. Like it's done. So the only thing you can do is then stabilize yourself within it. And, you know, I was talking with a dear friend of mine who is part of Destiny as well. And, she, you know, I've had lots of conversations with her about Natalie, because Natalie and I used to struggle so much. We're in a much better place now. But, you know, she's like, Camille, you might just have to let her, you know, she might just have to like, you know, set it all on fire. And then you just have to be there in the end to be like, okay, let's clean up the pieces, you know, like it's already there. So I'm here for you. And, you know, that's all I can do is stay stable in myself and help her clean up the pieces.
Yeah. Well, the good news is like, we also still have the tools to educate them, right? And then give them the tools to be able to walk these consequences effectively. Right. And so they're going to have to take the responsibility for it, but you know, we're not leaving them high and dry. Right. Kind of like, I don't know, like what was your childhood like? Because, you know, I feel like in my childhood, there were a lot of things that were not really explained well. And, you know, it was just kind of like, this is just the life that you have to live. And then I internalized a lot of those things as I became an adult. And it was just, like I said, I was in a single mother home, and there were spankings, there was yelling, there was a lot of things that I internalized and became a part of like my personality. And it wasn't really until I found, you know, some of the tools that we were mentioning that I realized, oh, snap, I have the ability to change it. Like I had wanted to change a lot of those things, you know what I mean? But, and I was trying to, but it wasn't working. It wasn't working for me. And it wasn't until like, you know, being a part of this community, which Self-Perfected wasn't like called Self-Perfected then, but, you know, being a part of that same community, essentially, where I started to see myself actually changing and like, oh, I can do this, you know. I guess that whole question was, what was your childhood like?
So I was an only child, and my mom was a single mom, but my dad wasn't around like in the beginning, like 1 through 3, maybe like born through 3, and then he started coming around. And I actually am both my parents' only child, but they were never like married or together or anything. But he actually, my dad used to be into like drugs and drinking and things like that. But then when I was 3, he completely got sober and has been sober everything ever since. He's in his 60s now.
Oh, wow.
And he moved from, I'm from California initially, but like I moved to Cincinnati when I was 8 and with my mom, and my mom pretty much told my dad, who's from LA, she was like, well, we're moving and you can come if you want or not, I don't care. And so my dad came, my mom was like, he's never going to come. And 6 months later, he like showed up at the door and was like, hey,
that's cool.
So they were never together, but he found an apartment and he's always been a part of my life. And my mom was a single mom, but we lived with my grandparents a lot of the time. And so I actually had a lot of support. My mom was a preschool, Montessori preschool teacher. And so there was never any really yelling or spanking or hitting or anything like that. I was also a pretty good kid too. I'm kind of like a little goody two shoes. Gosh, I was like telling the kids that the other day. Like in high school, I went to high school at King's High School, which is next to Kings Island up here in like Ohio. It's like an amusement park, and literally we would be sitting in the classroom and we could see like the roller coasters going. And my friends would skip and jump the fence and go to Kings Island. And my kids were like, did you ever do that, Mom? And I was like, no. I did in class because I didn't want to skip. Like, So there was never really like any hitting or yelling in my house. I was pretty good. I rode horses my whole life. So I was like pretty much like always at the barn, like cleaning stalls, riding horses, training horses, like, I don't know. So that was like, I always kind of had a lot of support. My grandparents were very involved.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I kind of like, in a way, almost like, even though my parents weren't together, I had a really supportive childhood. So then when I put myself in this position of like doing everything myself, when my mom had so many like people helping with her and me, like, it was like I really like set myself up to be overwhelmed. It's like I'm overwhelmed all the time, and it's like duh, like like I kind of set myself up that way, not even realizing that's what I was doing.
So that's really interesting. Would you say you liked your childhood?
Yeah, I had a nice childhood.
Okay, cool. So
I'd say my big thing is like I do like in the past, and I'm only now starting to be able to like I avoid conflict. That's not good. So there's a lot of suppression there. And I didn't really realize that until I got like in a relationship with a kid's dad, and I was like trying so hard not to control with him because I didn't want to like be one of those like controlling partners that was like, what are you doing? And what are you, and all on him. I didn't want to be like that. So I went the complete opposite way, and I didn't question him or anything. I didn't anything. And so he just completely took advantage of me and didn't even, again, it's not blaming him or trying to talk bad about him, accepted and allowed it, because I wanted to avoid conflict and I wanted to make it right and I wanted to make it work. And so it's like trying to make it work. I'm like molding myself into this little box that then I have no backbone for myself. I've lost myself in it.
Okay. So here's my next question. So your adult life, the things that you experienced as an adult, would that be the experience that you would want for your children?
No.
Okay. All right. And the reason why I'm asking this is because you had a childhood that you enjoyed, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like I have this conversation with parents all the time, did it make you or was it best in preparing you to be effective in this world? Yeah.
No. I mean, that's like, and I don't know, and I think a lot of, okay, so here is a big thing that I kind of forgot to mention. I think a lot of what kind of set me back wasn't necessarily parenting, though there were aspects of that that obviously did too, but like I was like not confident in myself. But I think that came from, and this has a lot to do with techno tutor and vocabulary, was when I was in first grade, I was hanging upside down on the monkey bars and I fell on top of my head. And we have plates in our head that when we're growing as kids, like they kind of move and they kind of grow with us. Well, mine got jammed. And so we didn't actually know that this had happened until I was in third grade. And I had 20/20 vision, but my eyes muscles were underdeveloped because of that. And so I couldn't read. I was in third grade and I couldn't read because I couldn't like follow things. Like I couldn't read bigger things because I couldn't follow, and I'd skip words and lines. And my mom was like, I don't know what's happening. And I did have a teacher that noticed and was like, I have a special eye doctor, because I'd go to the eye doctor and they'd be like, she has 20/20 vision. It's fine. I don't know, you know? And so I went to this special eye doctor and he was like, okay, her eye muscles are underdeveloped. And so I had to go to a special chiropractor who readjusted me and released the plates. And then I had to do eye exercises. So, you know, you'd go to like the gym. Well, I would do eye exercises where I had to like follow a like pin until my like eyes like made it double and I like kind of crossed, and then I had to take it back out. And then I'd have to lay down and follow like my mom would tap this wiffle ball and I would have to follow it with my eyes. I literally had to do eye exercises like you would like go to the gym and like
yeah.
So that put me so behind because I couldn't read. Right? Right. And so I was not confident at all. You know, I struggled through school. Like I said, when I was in high school, my friends would skip and go to Kings Island, and I would be like, no, I'm going to stay here because I don't want to miss class, because I had to try so hard just to make like A's, B's, and C's. Like, so hard. Like and it gave me test anxiety because I would do terrible on tests. And then it was like, so I had no confidence. So I would say that was like probably what held me back the most, was like I couldn't read. And then like that just totally smushed all my confidence.
Yeah.
And so hence why I'm almost 40 and a waitress, you know, like I'm back in school now for occupational therapy, but like, you know, it's like I had no confidence. Like I look back now and I'm like, man, if I would have had the confidence that I have now back then, like I would have done so many things.
Yeah.
So many things differently, and so many things like,
So, okay. So the question then is it enough to just have a home where, you know, your kids seem happy and they're not being yelled at and they're not being spanked, and these are all great things that I agree with, right? But is that enough?
No, I mean, I think like we've never done what we're doing now, right? With these groups, like we've never done this. Like we've never actually taken on the responsibility of like teaching our kids through like this kind of them navigating their learning. I mean, we've gone to different extremes. Like if you look at old school homeschool styles, you know, you either follow a curriculum, like you follow the White Oaks curriculum, or you follow, and many of my homeschool parents do those things, where I have a lot of homeschool friends that are not even part of these groups. And they follow the curriculum and they do this, and like, you know, they do, it was interesting. I was at my daughter's Ninja Warrior class yesterday. She does like a little gymnastics class thing. And I was like,
hang on, repeat that, because it just
and she was like,
it just cut out, like it just like went that laggy real quick, but repeat that. You're at your daughter's Ninja Warrior class.
Yes. And so there's a parent next to me with her daughter, and they were doing like the old school words where they would like, it was like they would be like cat, hat, blah, blah. It was like all, you know, it was like all of the words that you would do like in that old school curriculum way. You know what I'm saying? Like not techno tutor. It was like, you know, and it's like just trying to teach these kids. And, you know, so it's like, that's kind of the homeschool style that a lot of people will do still. And so what we're doing with techno tutor and with, you know, the self-perfected groups is that, you know, it's like a different approach where it's never been done before. So even though I had a nice childhood growing up, like it still wasn't effective. You know, it still wasn't like actually teaching me how to be my own critical thinker. It was still not like following my own path within like where I could find and grow my actual potential. Like it didn't do any of those things. It didn't teach, you know, it wasn't supportive in those ways. and so I think that's what's different with these groups, with Techno Tutor and Self-Perfected, is that, we're actually allowing the children to come into their full potential in such a beautifully organic, natural way, where it's not like, again, then you have the other homeschool groups that are like, do what you want. The kids get everything they want and blah, blah, blah. And like, that's like almost the extreme the other way. And so this is like a very direct, very like practical way of allowing human beings to flourish.
Yeah. I see it as like having the best of both worlds. It's like, okay, yeah, you can direct your own learning, and you can actually be really intelligent, really effective, like get everything that you need in order to succeed in this world. Because like, if you're happy, but you are, I don't want to say dumb, but but if you don't have the tools of like just knowing how to operate within this world, you're not going to do well, right? And then also, if you have the tools to like, well, the knowledge, let's say, but emotionally you're not stable within yourself, you're also not going to do well, right? Let me ask you, I guess before you started with Techno Tutor specifically, did you know that, like, I guess the way that you're raising your kids now, did you know it was possible? Like, what, I guess, how were you thinking about parenting then versus now?
I mean, I was in survival mode. I mean, I still am, to a certain extent, but like, so it was kind of like, get through the days, send them to school so I can take care of what I need to do. Like, school will teach them. I don't need it. It was like, of course I'll teach them some things at home, but like, school's the one that's responsible. It's like the responsibility. Like, I think with Techno Tutor, it's like, okay, we take on that responsibility then. And so we then are able to like effectively walk through emotions by either plugging them into Techno Tutor or, learn about things through that instead of like sloughing off the responsibility on somebody else. And so with taking on that responsibility, then we can move through things with more flow, I guess. I don't know, like, if that's the way to say it, but like, it's like, it actually like works, like.
Yeah. How do you think your life would be different right now if you didn't have like Techno Tutor or Self-Forgiveness or like any of those tools?
Oh, I'd be a mess. I would have, my poor kids. Like, I would be such a mess. Like, I see other parents, struggle so much in like some of the, and of course I still do too on many levels, but like, I at least can like see and like, it's like the more clear I become within myself, the more clear I can see within other people. Like, oh, if you could just let that go, your life would be like, so much like relief.
Yeah.
It's like and so I only know because I've like walked it, so I mean, I think that, yeah, honestly, like with Techno Tutor, like I could probably utilize it more than what I'm using it. I mean, we use it every day, but like I feel like we could probably expand more within, utilizing it to be more like, how am I trying to say? We could utilize it better. And I feel like that with a lot of things though, like I feel like that with my like phone and stuff like that. Like, oh, I could probably do some cooler things with this. Like I need to.
Yeah. It's funny, like that point that you said of just like, if that other person, like you can see really clearly, if they could just let go of this point, they would have so much relief. I feel like a lot of people, they probably have what they think of as a good life, right? But they don't realize how much better it could be. That's a really good point that you brought up there. And then I guess, what was kind of the catalyst for you getting Techno Tutor?
Okay, so that's an interesting story.
Okay, I'm here for it.
Okay, so I had already been writing with Destiny for a long time and reading a lot of blogs and stuff like that. But then I talked to Cameron and he tried to sell me on techno tutor, and I was like, okay, yeah, like I can totally dig all of this. And then he told me the price, and I was like, oh yeah, as a single mom, I don't like and I kind of didn't really, I kind of got it, but I didn't get it. And that's actually Cameron's the one that introduced me to eCloth. So even though I had been part of Destiny for so long, I never dove into eCloth at all.
Oh.
Like I read all the blogs and read all the stuff, but I didn't really understand. And so I dove into eCloth then, and I was like, whoa, like, oh yay. And
Interesting.
so it took me a year actually to commit to techno tutor. So he, Cameron and I had a couple conversations, and then that was it, right? It was like a year went by, but I had been listening to all the eCloths, and the more I listened to those, the more I was like, sound, vocabulary, like, fuck, like, I gotta get this. Like, it's so important. Oh my God. Like, it's so important. And so that's kind of that's when I messaged Cameron like a year later, and I was like, okay, do this. Like, all right. Yes,
Yeah.
fine.
What did you see that was like that you wanted to change, that you thought like, okay, this is what's going to help me change that?
Because I knew, well, again, from my past of not being able to read, from my injury, I was like, okay, this could really benefit me and help me. And then with my kids, I'm like, okay, this could be truly supportive for them, and them developing their vocabulary, them developing reading skills that far surpass wherever I was or am, and at such a young age. And also the sound aspect, within, if you listen to the eCloth interviews, and there's so many of them, but they, talk a lot about like sound, and especially those parenting interviews. Those are really helpful. But then also within, actually, I was thinking, I was listening to like the Demons in the Afterlife with Mikey, and he said there was a couple interviews where he really went into the effects of sound and the relation to vocabulary, and that's kind of what turned me. That, like, I was like, oh, okay, I get that. That makes sense, And it was so long ago, I can't even remember the exact like interview or
Yeah.
whatnot, but like, yeah, that was kind of my turning point. And so that's when I was like, all right, techno tutor, let's do this. Like,
Nice. All right, so I guess kind of coming back full circle here and wrapping it up, we talked about, really the purpose of this is just talking about emotional stability, especially in these days and times, and also your kids being effective, having an effective education, being able to communicate effectively, so that when they do become adults, it's not just, oh, I had a great childhood, but I actually can operate and do the things that I want to do in this life. I guess, give me kind of your perspective on the climate of society right now, especially here in the States.
yeah.
Give me your perspective on that, and how you're navigating through that, and maybe how someone else, like if they're on the outside looking in, like, maybe they relate to just your analysis of what's going on out there.
Yeah, so I definitely explain everything to my kids. Like, some people are like, no, you explain too much to your kids, and I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, I try and tell them everything, and also that it's like information, so it can be, information is somebody else's perspective. Like, you don't actually know some of this stuff is happening, so it's kind of like, well, this is what we're learning, but like, what's here in the physical is what is here. So with navigating what's going on in the world right now, it's like, I kind of just explained to my kids that they have to test things out for themselves and have to kind of, how do I say this? I mean, they got to be their own leader, but like, how do they practically do that? Like, you know, ask questions, but also like, I guess it's perspective. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, this information that's here is somebody's perspective. Like, it can be manipulated however it needs to be manipulated to have people think a certain way. Like, don't always believe everything. Question everything. Like, don't believe it just because a doctor said this, or just because an authority figure. That's like a big thing I'm trying to say. If it's an authority figure, like, even if it's me, like, you can question me, or if I'm in the wrong, like, I do this with my kids all the time with creating stable kids, is like, I am not perfect yet. And so when I do see that I've made a mistake with them, I will go to them and be like, you know what? I'm sorry for doing this. Like, I see where I was reacting in this way because of this, and that wasn't okay. And, you know, and kind of like letting them know that, like, just because I'm an adult, like, doesn't mean, and like, I stand in this like authority figure as a parent, but like, no, like, you are your own authority. You know, don't, just because a doctor says this, just because a lawyer says this, just because the president says this, like, doesn't mean it's true. Like, it does not mean that. So I think that's like the biggest thing, is having them navigate themselves. Adults aren't always right. Authority figures are not always right, you know, so, you know, that they have to really like find it within themselves to, you know, question and to make decisions based on what is here in their like physical reality, you know? And I think that's like a huge one. I think so often we think authority figures and we immediately like surrender to them, or, you know, like kind of and it's like that, you know, and especially like my kids do go places and spend the night and stuff like that. And, you know, of course, with like parents that I like really trust and things like that. But like, even with that, every time they go, I'm always like, you know, an adult isn't always right. Like, these things, you know, like, I talk to my kids about their bodies, and I talk to them, you know, about like what's appropriate and what's not. And, you know, we have all of these discussions, and I'm like, an adult isn't always right. So make sure that you are your own authority. And I think that's like the biggest thing, because there is so much information out there right now. It's so overwhelming. And, you know, everything's based on fear, you know, so it's like, you're scared of this and you're scared of that. And you're, you know, it's like, we're making all these decisions based on fear instead of directness. And it just creates a big fucking fuck. Like, we're fucked.
That's great. That's really well said. I think on the last podcast that Cam and I did, the self-perfected one, that Cam brought up that point of like how he's teaching Max and Seneca. They're learning about the solar system. They're learning about planets. They're learning about all these things, and, you know, going to the moon and all of that. And it's funny because, you know, there's conspiracy theories abound and everything. And Cam just says, you know, can we go to the moon? And Max says, yes. And he says, well, do we actually know that though? And Max says, well, we don't actually know, but that's what we believe, is that there were people that were on the moon. And so it's like, he has the information. He's not believing it based on just like, oh yes, you know, somebody told me that we went to the moon, and so we must have gone to the moon. It's like, well, that's, you know, what we understand is that we did go to the moon. And then, you know, like, there's, oh, okay. Is it better now? All right.
You're better now.
Cool. But he's like, yeah, that's what we understand, is that we went to the moon. And then, you know, is it actually true? Don't know. Could be fabricated. Yeah. I can't necessarily verify that for myself right now, but he has the information, but he's not taking it based on like, I must believe that this is true, because then if it comes out later that it wasn't, he's like, oh, okay, well, that's all right. You know, like it's not something that's like he was
concrete.
Exactly.
Kind of like the religions and stuff now, where people are like, no, but God exists, you know. And it's like, well, then when you question it or you like debunk it or whatever, then it's like, everybody doesn't know what to do with themselves because they base that as their starting point.
Exactly. And then you don't want to let go of it, and there's like so many like beliefs that you have around it, and that shapes your life and all this shit. Yeah.
Right. Because if you let go of it, then you're like, what the fuck am I? Like, what, like, Who am I? What is this?
Right,
All
exactly.
these questions that we ask ourselves anyway in these groups.
Yeah, yeah. We
Ask
do.
yourself
We
these
do.
questions, then those things come up.
Right. And those things really should be addressed, or at least given the tools to address them from a young age, so that by the time you're in your 20s, 30s, like you already know who you are and you're doing your purpose,
Yes.
right? And that's what we want for our kids. And I think right now, kind of the point that I wanted to also put out there was, if your kids are in school, they are getting whatever the system is feeding them.
Mhm.
And so
Totally.
if you look around and you are not pleased with this system in general, like you're not pleased with the government, you're not pleased with society, just know the school is what feeds that system.
Mhm.
It's what
Totally.
continues that whole process. And parents also play a part in it as well, a very big part, because you're the ones putting your kids in school, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a huge thing, is like, we're so stuck in the mentality of like, well, this is the way it's been, so then how do you do it differently? And it's
Yeah.
like, so it's like actually bringing yourself out of that comfort zone and actually trying to do it differently. And it might be in small increments. Like I said, with my kids, they go to
Yeah.
a special school that, like, I can move within my
Yeah.
realm. I can move a
It's
little bit different.
practical. It makes
Yeah,
sense for your situation, right?
right,
And
right.
yeah, I think
That's
you know this really well, but like we talk a lot of the times of like what's best, right? But that doesn't mean like we're like unforgiving or like not understanding of, hey, but this is where I'm at right now and this is what I can do. This is the best that I can do right now, right? And so it's I love having you in the group, because you move yourself so much and you are very practical and you get it. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Well, I feel like that's one thing with the groups that, like, I try and bring through as like my purpose within some of the groups is like, I have fucked up, like I like, and I have like put myself in this position. And so it's like, it's like, cause we do talk a lot about, oh, well, doing, homeschooling this way and that way. And sometimes it does, even for me, sometimes get a little like, oh my God, like I've fucked up so much, but with the same time, it's like, okay, well, there's going to be a lot of people in a starting point similar to mine where like I can be like, hey, it's okay. Like we can work with this, like,
Yeah.
and, so I feel like that is definitely one of my purposes in the group. And I try and bring that through, that like, it's okay. Like there are ways that we can like work from wherever we are,
Yeah.
and I've talked to a couple of different especially the women from the group, both the self-perfected and on the parenting side and like the actual self-perfected group. And they've been like, oh my God, thank you. And I'm like, it's okay. I feel you.
Yeah. Man. Okay. So I guess in closing then, this is perfect. What advice would you give to someone who was in a similar situation, who is in a similar situation to what you were in, and they're looking for a solution?
It's like what I was in like before, like Destiny and techno tutor and all of that.
Yeah, like I guess
or within those groups, like they're just starting.
I would say like a single parent, or a mother who is a stay-at-home mom who they've started off their kids, wrong with, fighting with them and creating consequences. What advice would you give, any of people in any of those situations?
I would first give yourself the space of grace, like start removing the things that are unnecessarily stressors. And I would start building your own vocabulary and your kids' vocabulary. Like if you do have techno tutor, use it. If you don't, maybe
Get it.
Start considering that. I mean, it's as a single mom, definitely the price point. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But there are payment methods. But and it is, definitely something that is a practical use that can support and help move through all of these things. Start writing and self-investigating. Like that, I think is such a huge one that was like such a helper for me, was like that self-investigation, that self-forgiveness, like really diving into that. The DIP light is free and it is a great starter. You know, diving into that and really start investigating yourself, questioning yourself, what is important, what is not important. But definitely giving yourself that space of grace and your children that space of grace. Because if you're a single mom, you are most likely in survival mode. And being in survival mode means that you are most likely making decisions based on like surviving frustration and like, you know, things that are not helpful for you or the kids. So get rid of the stressors that you can, and really focus on your individual growth, your self investigation, your vocabulary, your children's vocabulary, and start expanding that. And then those things that are important will start like falling away.
Do you think it would be supportive for them to join a community like the one we have, Self-Perfected?
Yeah, I think it is for sure. Definitely supportive. And I also, but for me personally, like I do find this group supportive, but I also really enjoy working one-on-one with somebody. And so I have over the years reached out to a few friends that are part of these groups, not Self-Work, but Destiny. I've like, because that's where I started. So I have more connections there currently. I honestly just joined the Self-Perfected group, though I knew like a lot of the people. But so I find these groups supportive, but I also work good one-on-one. So within these groups, you can find people to connect with.
Yeah.
So these groups are helpful with that. It's like a networking, you know, it's like we're all here together. So when you start networking and you start finding these like-minded people that are like, yes, like let's find solutions, you can really start like making that work. And so that's, yes, these groups are helpful and networking. And like I said, if you want to start working one-on-one, I personally do a lot better one-on-one. And so you can start finding those people in these groups or connecting with people to connect with, you know, like.
Well, if you're listening to this and you want to work with someone one-on-one, reach out to me. I can help you out with that. You know? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Or me or anybody, you know, like that's the thing with these groups is like, you know, and like I said, I've already had a couple people that I've like spoken with that they're like, oh yeah, thank you. And I'm just like, yes, it's okay. I feel you.
Awesome. Well, Camille, it was great to hear your perspective on things. And I appreciate you sharing all that with us.
Yes, thanks for having me, Drake. This was actually a growing moment for me too, because I have been really trying to push myself to do more stuff like this and more like videos and things. Like in the past, I've done a lot of writing and like shared some of that, but like, I don't know, doing videos and actually like being able to like express like in a situation like this is cool and it's awesome. And it's totally like pushing beyond my like comfort zone and boundaries, which is awesome.
Awesome. Badass. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there and we'll see this on like Facebook and YouTube and everywhere. Awesome. Thanks, all right. Bye.